Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into information theory. You know, based on those excerpts he sent over from Symbols, Signals, and Noise
Hmm.
by John R. Pierce, we're going to be like decoding how information works, from like simple Morse code to the complexities of space communication.
It's fascinating. You know how information theory, it gives us this framework for understanding communication, and it goes like beyond just the technical stuff. It really delves into like the essence of meaning, like whether it's between people or even machines or even like the natural world.
That's a great point. Our outline mentions this thing, the power of theories. So what makes a theory like this so valuable?
Well, think about Newton's laws of motion, right? They don't explain every tiny detail about motion,
Huh.
but they give us this incredibly powerful tool to understand and predict things, like, launching rockets. So similarly, information theory, it focuses on these like key aspects of communication. So how much information a message has, how efficiently it can be encoded, and, how noise interferes with it.
So it's like a lens, right? Helps us zoom in on the most important parts, even if it doesn't capture every single thing.
Exactly. And this focus, it helps us navigate our world. It's just like overflowing with information these days,
Okay.
designing communication systems and understanding the limits and even like grappling with questions of language and meaning.
This brings us to entropy. And the outline says it's not about thermodynamics, but it's about surprise in a message. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Like imagine you get this message, right? And it's full of unexpected twists and turns. That's high entropy. It keeps you guessing. But a low entropy message, that's predictable, maybe even boring.
It's like getting a text that just says K. Not a lot of surprises there.
Exactly. And what's amazing is we can measure the surprise, this entropy, using a unit called the bit.
Bits. I feel like we hear about them all the time, but I never really understood like what they actually are.
Well, think of like flipping a coin.
Right.
Two equally likely outcomes, heads or tails. So the information you get from knowing the result, that's one bit. It's like the basic unit of measurement in information theory. And it helps us understand how much information a message contains.
So like a 100-bit message. Is that like flipping a coin 100 times and then telling you the result of each flip?
That's a great analogy. And just like there are two possible outcomes for a single coin flip, there are two to the power of 100 possible messages. That could be represented by those 100 bits. That's a huge number.
Yeah, that's mind-boggling. But before we get lost in the math here, let's talk about encoding. The outline, it mentions Morse code and Huffman codes. How do they fit into all of this?
Encoding is like cleverly representing information using a limited set of symbols. So Morse code is a great example. Uses dots and dashes to represent letters. And it's designed so that the most common letters, they have the shortest codes to make transmission more efficient.
Yeah, like B is the most common letter, right? And it's just a single dot in Morse code.
Exactly. Huffman codes, they kind of take this to another level. They minimize the average number of bits needed to represent a message based on how probable each symbol is.
So if I'm sending a message and it has a lot of E's, a Huffman code would give E an even shorter code than Morse code.
Yeah, you got it. And this efficient encoding, it's super critical in a world overflowing with data and limited bandwidth. Helps us squeeze like the maximum information into every signal.
That makes sense. But communication, it's not always perfect.
Right.
There's noise and interference, stuff that messes with our messages. How does information theory deal with that?
That's where noise comes in. It's anything that distorts or corrupts a signal. So it could be static on the radio, errors in a digital transmission, or even like background noise when you're having a conversation. Information theory gives us a way to analyze its impact and to design strategies to like overcome it.
And the outline, it mentions filtering and smoothing. What are those?
Okay, so think of filtering like using a sieve to separate signal from noise. If we know what the noise is like, we can make filters to block the frequencies where it's strongest and let the signal pass through.
Oh, okay. So it's like noise-canceling headphones for our data.
That's a great analogy. Smoothing, on the other hand, it's like averaging out the random fluctuations in a signal. Like imagine you're taking multiple measurements and calculating the average to get a more accurate reading.
Oh, that makes me think of like all those times I've had to ask someone to repeat themselves because of background noise. Maybe my brain is doing some internal smoothing.
It's very possible. Our brains are amazingly good at filtering out noise and finding meaning from incomplete or like distorted signals. But even with advanced filtering and smoothing, there are like fundamental limits to how much information we can reliably send over a noisy channel.
Okay, now we're getting into some complex stuff. What sets those limits?
Okay, get ready for some mind-bending physics. One fundamental limit is set by thermal noise. It's like unavoidable noise from the random motion of electrons in any conductor.
So even in a perfectly isolated system, there's going to be some noise just from atoms, like jiggling around.
Precisely. And this thermal noise, it determines the weakest signal we can detect. If the signal is weaker than that, it's like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane. It gets lost in the chaos.
And I imagine this thermal noise is even worse in space, right? Where temperatures can be extreme.
Absolutely. The hotter the environment, the stronger that thermal noise is going to be. And this is a major challenge for deep space communication, where signals are traveling vast distances through a very harsh and noisy environment.
Wow. It's incredible to think that noise is just like woven into the fabric of the universe, not just like an external annoyance.
That's a really profound observation. Noise is a fundamental part of reality, and understanding its nature and its limitations is crucial for effective communication, whether you're talking across a room or across the galaxy.
All right. I'm ready for another challenge. The outline mentions quantum effects. How do those play into all of this?
Quantum effects, they become super important when you're dealing with really weak signals or really high frequencies. In the quantum world, energy exists in these discrete packets called quanta, and observing a signal can actually introduce uncertainty because of the interaction between the observer and what's being observed.
Hold on. I thought we were talking about communication, not like philosophy.
hmm
How can observing a signal change it?
It's one of the most baffling aspects of quantum mechanics. At that level, particles, they don't have definite properties until they're measured. Measuring forces the particle to choose a state, and that introduces uncertainty into the measurement.
So it's like the signal is blurry and observing forces it to come into focus, but not always in the way you expect it.
That's a good way to think about it. This quantum uncertainty, it has practical implications for communication. It means there's this fundamental limit to how precisely we can measure a signal, even without any other noise present.
This is blowing my mind. It's like peering behind the curtain of reality.
That's the beauty of information theory. It takes us from everyday communication to the frontiers of physics, where we're still trying to figure out the nature of information itself. And along the way, it gives us insights into language, meaning, and even the limits of human perception.
This is incredibly fascinating. But before we dive even deeper, let's pause here for a moment. We'll be back shortly to explore more mind-blowing concepts from the world of information theory.
Welcome back. Ready for some more mind-bending information theory?
Absolutely. Before the break, we were talking about how observing a signal can make things uncertain in the quantum world. It's like the universe is playing hide and seek with information.
Yeah, it really challenges our usual ideas about information. But let's switch gears for a second and explore another dimension of information theory, literally.
Literally. Okay, now I'm picturing some kind of interdimensional portal,
Mhm.
but I'm guessing it's a little more abstract than that.
You're right. It's not about physical dimensions. Instead of thinking about a signal as a single point on a line, imagine it as a point in a space with many dimensions. Each dimension is like a different feature of the signal, like its amplitude at a certain time.
So instead of a flat graph, it's more like a complex, layered way of representing the signal.
Precisely. And this multidimensional way of looking at things, it's really powerful. It lets us see signals and noise in a new way and develop some really cool techniques for transmitting information efficiently.
Can you give me an example of how this multidimensional thinking works in real life?
Okay, imagine you're sending a signal from a satellite to Earth. That signal has to travel through a lot of noise. It can get messed up along the way. But if you think of the signal as a point in this multidimensional space, engineers can create these error-correcting codes. They act like a safety net around the signal.
So even if noise messes with the signal, it's more likely to still land within the correct area of this multidimensional space, and then the receiver can correct the errors.
Exactly. It's like drawing a circle around the signal point. Even if the signal we receive is a little bit off, it's still closer to the right point than any other. And that helps the receiver figure out what the original signal was, even with some errors.
That's pretty amazing. It's like turning a theoretical idea into a practical tool to make communication better.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about information theory. It's like a bridge between abstract math and real-world engineering, always pushing the limits of what we thought was possible with communication.
Let's move on to those extra intriguing nuggets you mentioned earlier. The outline mentions Maxwell's demon. What's that all about?
Maxwell's demon is this thought experiment. It explores the connection between information and energy. Imagine this tiny demon who can see each molecule in a container of gas. And the demon has a little door that he can open and close. He lets fast molecules go through one way and slow molecules go through the other way.
So the demon is basically sorting the molecules by their speed,
Hmm.
but without using any energy to do it.
Right, that's the idea. And it seems like this would break the second law of thermodynamics, the one that says disorder always increases in a closed system. By sorting the molecules, it looks like the demon is decreasing disorder, creating order from chaos.
I sense a paradox. How can the demon, cheat the laws of physics?
Well, the key is that the demon needs information to do this sorting. He has to see the molecules and figure out how fast they're going. Getting this information, it costs energy. And the energy needed to get the information is at least as much as the energy the demon saves by doing the sorting.
So the demon is paying for the decrease in disorder with information, keeping things balanced in the universe.
That's a great way to put it. Maxwell's demon shows us that information and energy are deeply connected. Information itself is a valuable resource, something we have to consider in any physical process.
It makes you wonder, are there other hidden costs to information that we haven't even thought about yet? This brings us to another interesting point, the link between language and meaning. Can we really measure the information content of language?
It's definitely not as simple as just counting the letters in a word. Language has so many nuances. Context, hidden meanings, things that go beyond just the literal interpretation. But information theory can offer some cool insights into how language works.
The outline mentions something called the entropy of English text. What does that mean?
Remember, entropy is about surprise. If English text was completely random, with each letter having an equal chance of appearing, the entropy would be super high. But language isn't random. Certain letters and combinations are more likely than others.
Like how the letter Q is almost always followed by a U in English.
Exactly. These patterns and constraints in language, they lower the entropy. By analyzing lots of English text, researchers think its entropy is somewhere between 0.6 and 1.3 bits per character.
That's much lower than the 4.7 bits per character we'd have for a random sequence. So language is like a compressed file. It has built-in redundancy.
That's a good analogy. And that redundancy is what makes language so strong. Even if we miss a few letters or words, we can often still understand the meaning because of the context and the patterns we've learned.
It makes me think about all the ways we communicate, from formal writing to casual conversations, even emojis, and body language. They all have their own entropy, right?
That's a really insightful observation. It shows that communication isn't just about sending raw information. It's about conveying meaning within a shared context. Information theory gives us a framework, but it doesn't capture all the subtle things about how humans interact.
It's like the difference between analyzing the chemical composition of a painting versus experiencing the art itself.
Exactly. And this leads us to the last extra intriguing nugget, cybernetics, and the interplay between communication and control.
Cybernetics. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It might sound futuristic, but the basic ideas have been around for a while. Cybernetics is about how systems, whether it's machines, living things, or even societies, use information to regulate themselves and stay in control.
Like the thermostat in my house. It's always checking the temperature and then adjusting the furnace to keep things at a set point.
That's a classic example. Cybernetic ideas apply to way more complex systems too, like our nervous system or even global financial markets.
The outline mentions self-regulating machines. Ever talk about, robots taking over the world?
Not quite yet. But the idea of machines regulating themselves is becoming super important in fields like robotics, AI, and self-driving cars. These systems use feedback loops and process information to adapt to changes in their environment and to make decisions without humans having to step in.
It feels like we're entering a new era, where the line between living things and machines is getting blurry.
It's a fascinating idea, and maybe a little unsettling. Information theory is a key part of this merging of biology, technology, and information. By understanding how communication and control work, we can get a deeper understanding of how complex systems, both natural and artificial, function and change over time.
Wow, this is a lot to digest. It's like you've opened a door to a whole new way of looking at the world.
Right. It really challenges what we think we know and expands our horizons, ready to connect all these pieces and see the bigger picture.
Absolutely. Let's see how information theory shapes our understanding of the universe and our place in it. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground: entropy, bits, noise, even multidimensional spaces. And we've talked about these connections to physics and language, cybernetics. Where does this all lead us? Like, what's the big takeaway?
It's amazing, how information theory, it started with these abstract concepts, but it's completely reshaped how we understand communication systems. We can actually measure information like how much a message has and how much a channel can handle. This has led to like incredible breakthroughs from the telegraph to the internet.
Yeah, it really is amazing how these theoretical ideas have had such a huge, like, real-world impact. I mean, on the tech we use every single day.
And the impact goes like way beyond technology. Information theory has changed how we think about information itself. It's not just this passive thing anymore. It's an active force that shapes like how we interact with the world.
So it's not just about what we communicate, but how we communicate, and understanding the limits and the possibilities.
Exactly. And that has huge implications for fields like AI, cryptography, even neuroscience. It's changing how we view the human brain.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but how does this connect to me, the listener? Why should I care about information theory?
Because it's not just about, you know, technology or abstract ideas. It's about understanding how we make sense of the world. Every time you read a book, listen to music, have a conversation, you're engaging with these principles.
So it's like this hidden language that underlies every form of communication.
That's a great way to put it. And when you start to understand this language, you can really appreciate the complexity, the beauty of everything around you. You can start to see patterns and connections that you never noticed before.
It's like I've been wearing these blurry glasses, and now I've finally got the right prescription, and I can see the world in high def.
That's a perfect analogy. This new clarity, it can help you think more critically about the information you come across, be more discerning, communicate more effectively in all parts of your life.
So what's the one, like, aha moment that you want listeners to walk away with from this whole deep dive?
I want them to realize that information isn't just passively consumed. We actively create and shape it. By understanding information theory, we can be more conscious, more intentional about how we use and manage this precious resource.
It's powerful. We're not just passive consumers in the information age, but active participants. We've got the tools to navigate it.
Precisely. The more we understand about information, the better we'll be at making decisions, solving problems, and building a more meaningful, connected world.
We've definitely decoded a lot about information theory today. But as you said, there's always more to explore. This deep dive has honestly sparked so many new questions for me.
That's the sign of a truly successful deep dive. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about opening up those new avenues of inquiry and sparking a passion for lifelong learning.
So what's that final thought you want to leave our listeners with? Something to ponder as they go about their day.
I'd ask them to think about this. If information is truly fundamental to the universe, like some physicists believe, what does that say about the nature of reality itself? Is the universe at its core a giant computer processing information? Or is information something that we, as conscious beings, create, impose on the world to make sense of it?
Wow, those are some deep questions. I'll definitely be thinking about those.
And that's where our deep dive comes to an end, on the edge of the unknown, with a sense of wonder and a thirst for further exploration.
Thank you so much for taking us on this incredible journey through the world of information theory. And to all our listeners out there, keep those neurons firing. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.